Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on the time zone in which you're watching us. So my name is Thomas Granier. I'm an arbitration practitioner here in Paris and a co-editor of the Delos GAP, together with FCIArb. And today, I'm particularly happy to welcome you to this very practical session on how to manage one's profile on LinkedIn. This is something that, although some of us may think they need to post three things once in a while and a photo of them would be sufficient, but in fact, there is a lot of things happening and lots of tricks to know in order to really be very efficient. And today we have Amanda Lee with us, who is going to explain all this 10 commandments of such management. Amanda is most likely known to all of you, but I nevertheless would like to say a few words about her. Amanda is a solicitor, and she practices at Samers, and she's dual qualified as a solicitor and a New York attorney, and so she has a right to audits before in civil proceedings in the higher court of England, and very importantly, she has a wealth of experience because she has sat very impressively as arbitrator on more than 25 occasions. So she really has a wealth of experience as a practitioner. But it's not only this. She also was the first female global co-chair of the Institute's Young Member Group, to which she was appointed in 2017. She led the Young Members Group Global Steering Committee from 2017 to 2018. And Amanda is a director of Arbitral Women. And very important point about Amanda is that she's the founder of Careers in Arbitration. And for those, the few of you who wouldn't know what Careers in Arbitration is, it's a great initiative that which purpose is actually to facilitate the meeting between the candidates to arbitration positions and the opportunities. So what it tells a lot about Amanda, because not only is she very successful and experienced practitioner, but she's also someone who thinks of others and who gives a lot, and that speaks volumes, frankly. So I have to say I'm particularly happy today to listen to Amanda. So Amanda, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction, Thomas. Thank you to Delos Dispute Resolution for inviting me to speak to you all today. Delos has been very kind to me during this challenging pandemic period, and I've had a wonderful time and the privilege of presenting Tag Time. So please do tune in and see me and Kabir make a whole series of terrible jokes while we have some very impressive people speaking to us. Now, excluding my personal LinkedIn account, I share arbitration-related content with an audience of more than 40,000 followers. That includes the 26,500 who follow Careers in Arbitration. So needless to say, I spend quite a lot of my time on social media. I don't sleep very much. Now, before I share my 10 commandments of LinkedIn with you, I want to start by speaking very briefly about why social media appeals to so many of us. Because by better understanding the psychology behind social media use, you can create content that resonates a little bit more widely. So simply put, using social media is addictive. Nowadays, our phones offer us access to billions of potential contacts from across the globe. And for many, accumulating as many contacts as possible is an important motivating factor driving our use of social media platforms. When I first started using LinkedIn, I was very worried I wasn't going to get to 50 contacts. It was a really big deal. I was going, oh my gosh, maybe I don't know 50 people. It's really bad. Now, we're hardwired to want to connect with others. Maslow's hierarchy of needs highlights relationships in its third tier. The need to belong is a fundamental psychological need, and our social media relationships directly feed into that need. Now, back in the 90s, British anthropologist Robin Dunbar suggested that humans are capable of maintaining stable social relationships with about 150 people. He went further than that in 2018. He went on to suggest that we devote about 40% of our time to just 5 people and another 20% of our time to a further 10. So why are we so keen to use the remaining 40% of our time to connect with seemingly endless numbers of further contacts in the virtual world? And how can this drive be used to inform your social media strategy? Studies have shown that we're wired to derive pleasure from talking about ourselves on social media. 2012 study by Harvard University found that disclosing information about yourself on social media activates the part of the brain that's associated with pleasure. When subjects speak about themselves, the parts of their brain associated with reward become strongly engaged. They're, however, a little bit less engaged when they're talking about other people. So let's do a quick poll. How much time do you think that we spend talking about ourselves in everyday life? Now, I think a few people have started answering that question. And I can ask you the same question about social media. You should all see the poll on the screen there. Okay. So let's see what you think. So the highest proportion of you think that we spend 40% of our time talking about ourselves in real life. Well, you're wrong. We actually spend about 60% of our time talking about ourselves in real life, which is quite a lot of time. We're a little bit self-involved as a species, human beings. What about on social media? Well, 80% and 90%. Those who got 80%, you guys are right. 80% of our time, we really, really like to talk about ourselves on social media. Now, when we engage with others successfully, our brains produce dopamine, rewarding our behavior and encouraging us to repeat it. Positive social stimuli has the potential to trigger a dopamine release, which makes every like, comment, photograph of smiling faces or positive response from our community a potential reward and an incentive to keep doing what we are doing, assuming we're doing it right and we're getting that reward. So we are hardwired as a species to want to connect. And we want the reward that comes from our content being well received. In fact, studies have actually shown that tweeting is harder to resist than cigarettes and alcohol. That's not all, though. Further tests have shown that 10 minutes of tweeting can increase oxytocin levels by more than 13%. You couple that with a reduction in cortisol and ACTH, which are hormones associated with stress. And basically, social media offers this addictive cocktail of pleasure stimulation. You enjoy doing it, you get a dopamine release, and it's actually less stressful. And hey, we're all in a pretty high stress profession. So, if you can do something to reduce your stress levels, why wouldn't you? The reason for telling you all this is to make the point that you ignore the power and the resulting benefits of social media at your peril. And so that brings me to the title of my talk today, which is the 10 Commandments of LinkedIn for Arbitration Practitioners. So I'm going to share some slides now, assuming we don't have any technical problems. What could possibly go wrong? Okay, hopefully everybody can see my slides. All right, now these are my personal commandments. There are a few tips and tricks to help you make the most of LinkedIn, build your network, and find your voice. So we kick off with, thou shalt not send a connection request without an introductory note. Now, it always surprises me that people think this is a sensible strategy for first contact. You wouldn't go up to somebody at a conference and thrust a copy of your business card or your resume into their hands and then vanish without a word. Trust me, if you start doing this at arbitration events, you are going to develop a reputation. It is not going to be a good one. Aside from being rather rude, failing to spend even a few minutes crafting a short introductory note is a missed opportunity. A connection request is the first step in what will hopefully become a mutually beneficial and satisfying professional relationship. If you don't have a legitimate reason to reach out to somebody, whether that's to broaden your network, to acknowledge your potential connections, contribution to the field, to propose a collaboration, or for something else entirely, why exactly are you wasting your time? I mean, it would be nice to have so much time to spare that you can just fling connection requests into the ether without investing in them. But it's important to make that time and to put in that effort. Now, some social media users see the accumulation of connections as a simple numbers game. And the magic number from LinkedIn's perspective is 500 plus. You see that on profiles all the time. That's the number at which LinkedIn stops advertising how many connections you have to the community at large. Once you've got 500 plus, hey, you've made it. From the perspective of LinkedIn, you are now in the big leagues. You have more than 500 people who connect with your account. Now, if you want to simply accumulate connections, that's fine. Good luck to you. Tell me how that goes from a business development perspective. If it's very successful, great. But if you want to build genuine professional relationships with those in the field, the sort of relationships that are likely going to lead to interesting opportunities for collaboration, simply adding anyone who comes your way is not going to work. After all, remember Dunbar's number. We cannot sustain satisfactory social relationships with thousands of people. When it comes down to it, social media connections are about quality, not quantity. One strong connection that is the result of mutual respect and genuine engagement is much more likely to lead to a valuable opportunity, an appointment, the opportunity to co-author a potential job in the future, than having hundreds and hundreds of connections that you've never interacted with or contacted via any medium. So that brings me to my second commandment. This one's quite long. Thou shalt not post anything on LinkedIn that may adversely impact your prospects of being appointed or serving as an arbitrator in the present or the future. Now, this is basically a no-brainer. For those hoping to start sitting as an arbitrator in the future, remember that what you say on social media now may be used by an industrious party in the future to try and challenge your appointment. As algorithms become ever more sophisticated, information about what arbitrators have said on public platforms is going to become easier to locate and dissect. As Professor Kate Eichhorn discussed in her 2019 book, The End of Forgetting, social media is both chaining us to our pasts and making it impossible for us to truly forget anything, even things that we dearly like to leave behind. Now, our ideas often evolve over time, and with increasing experience and maturity, more extreme views can be tempered. So those views that you had as a young associate or as a student when you were trying to get some attention on social media and build your network, they may be far removed from those that you hold by the time you're seeking your first appointment. So make sure that anything you say on social media is something you would feel comfortable addressing if it appeared in correspondence challenging your appointment in the future. Do not jeopardize your future in order to attract a little bit of attention on social media in the present. Do not be afraid to self-censor. After all, social media has a really long memory. Now, the IBA guidelines on conflicts of interest include circumstances in which an arbitrator has a relationship with another arbitrator or with the counsel for one of the parties through a social media network, and in which an arbitrator has a relationship with one of the parties or its affiliates through a social media network on the green list, and that's addressed in Guideline 4.4. However, that's not the end of the story. For those presently sitting, there are a number of potential pitfalls to navigate. 2014, the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators Social Media Guidance Note Committee published guidance on arbitration and social media for neutrals. And that guidance note highlights some of the challenges that social media may present due to obligations to which an arbitrator must adhere, and it offers some guidance, some practical help. The need to avoid inappropriate ex parte communications, for example. Social media is a platform that's conducive to people just dropping you a quick note to wish you a happy birthday without necessarily thinking, oh, is there some wider implication to what I've just done? The need to maintain integrity, independence, and confidentiality. These are all key things that arbitrators need to keep in mind, and you need to keep those things in mind within the social media context as well. Counsel must also be cognizant of situations in which the conduct of other members of their firm may inadvertently cause difficulty. So if a colleague at your firm invites the arbitrator in your present proceedings to join their network without realizing the proceedings are pending, you just need to make sure that people are aware. what's happening in this regard. Counsel in arbitral proceedings may find themselves in an awkward position. For example, if you're part of a membership body or an association and you're obliged to publicize some sort of prearranged event at which the arbitrator is speaking via your personal social media account, you might end up feeling a little bit awkward about this. If you feel awkward, if you feel uncomfortable in any way, not tagging the arbitrator in a post is the least you can do. It's best probably not to post at all in the circumstances. So use social media responsibly. That same year, 2014, the IBA published the IBA International Principles on Social Conduct for the Legal Profession. Now, the purpose of the principles is to promote conduct that's consistent with relevant rules of professional responsibility and common civility. Now, the principles offer guidance for bar associations and regulatory bodies, but the values they address, independence, integrity, responsibility, confidentiality, and need to maintain public confidence, are principles that should be noted by lawyer and non-lawyer arbitration practitioners alike. So, on a lighter note, we turn to my third commandment. Thou shalt not neglect to proofread. This is a tribute to my father, whose great principle in life is that no lawyer has ever written a letter that doesn't contain at least one error. So, Dad, this one is for you. What you post on social media is a direct extension of your professional brand. As an existing or aspiring arbitration practitioner, you are expected to be able to write incomplete sentences and to be able to spell words with a reasonable degree of accuracy. You also need to be sufficiently in control of your own views to refrain from arbitrarily insulting other members of the arbitration community, arbitral institutions, initiatives, and so on and so forth. Do not get yourself in trouble. Everyone makes the occasional grammatical error or includes the odd typo. Some of mine make me cringe when I spot them, and I then subsequently amend them. You can edit on LinkedIn, by the way, just in case anybody didn't know. You can edit. You can't change pictures, but you can edit what you've written in your posts. The impact of a carefully crafted comment on a recent case or development is significantly reduced if it is littered with typographical and grammatical errors. And this is particularly important for those who are taking their first steps into the world of social media to remember. If you're not very comfortable with the LinkedIn platform yet, do not start arbitrarily tagging people in your posts. You're probably going to tag the wrong person. You're going to tag them and then end up with another name next to their name or part of their name next to their name. Think carefully as well about whether you really need to tag the person that you're thinking about tagging. Does that famous arbitrator really need to know that you just read one of their articles and it made you feel nostalgic for that first arbitration class you had long ago? These are very busy people. Do you need to tag them in every single post? Tag responsibly. Just take that extra 60 seconds and review before pressing the big blue button and putting your content out into the world. Now, the need to proofread extends not just to your posts, but to your profile. The summary and experience sections are particularly important, but do not neglect proofreading your name and your title. Writing your entire name in lowercase or capital letters, for example, does not scream, I am a professional legal person and you should give me a large case and appoint me as an arbitrator. The former makes you look as if perhaps you set up your profile in a rush and you forgot how to use capital letters. The second makes you look like you were yelling at everybody. We associate capital letters with yelling. If your name is being yelled, it's not a fanfare. People are going to look at that and they're going to be like, whoa, that's a little bit aggressive, guys. So, chill out. Now, a quick practical tip to make proofreading a little bit easier is to copy your content into a Word document, let the spell checker do its job. Make sure, however, that you still conduct a manual proofread. Spell check doesn't pick up correctly spelled words that you've used in the wrong place, there and there being classic examples. That brings me to number 4. Now, I did promise there was going to be a parrot. There are some vicious rumors about parrots, mainly started by Kabir. So here we have a parrot. Number 4, thou shalt not treat your LinkedIn profile or your feed as a time capsule. Now, the purpose of LinkedIn is not to allow you to update your network with every single move you are making. After all, we all have lives. We're professionals. We do not want to give the impression that we wake up in the morning and we post every 25 minutes on LinkedIn. That is not a good professional image. If you want to share a photograph of your green coffee or your new parrot, yes, I included that so I could have a parrot in my slides. I'm not ashamed of that. There are other social media platforms that are probably more suitable. However, if you never update your profile and you never share anything meaningful with your network, your profile is going to become rather stale. And you're going to appear to be a little bit out of touch, a little bit stuck in a time warp. So what you need to do is to make sure that you conduct regular profile audits. Make sure that you're adding new experiences acquired, updating any videos or presentations that you share, and you can share these on your profile. Make sure that you add new positions. If you've been appointed to a committee, great, add it. People will know. If people are interested in engaging with that committee, they might reach out to you. You're giving them a reason to get in contact with you. And hey, after all, we all like accumulating connections. That's what that's what the psychology tells us. Make sure that you remove anything that's no longer relevant. Things that were relevant at the beginning of your careers are probably less relevant 5 years later and 10 years later. There's no need to include every single academic experience you have had since primary school on your LinkedIn profile. After all, most people probably do not care that you won the high school science fair. It may have been the highlight of your scholastic career, but it's probably not going to help you when it comes to getting engagement as an arbitration practitioner. So congratulations to you, but keep that one for the high school reunions. If your profile doesn't include basic details about things like your professional education and your related experience, at best, it's going to look a little bit incomplete. At worst, it's going to look like you've got something to hide. Be careful. Do not create accidental red flags in your professional profile. I've received a number of connection requests from colleagues and students who went to the same university as me or were in some way connected to my university. It is worth including things like your university. Trust me. So that brings us to number 5. Thou shalt not limit your use of social media to self-promotion. Now, I was going to use the word shameless in this commandment, but I felt that maybe I'd be being a little bit mean. It's the shameless self-promoters that particularly sadden me when it comes to social media. These are the people who only ever share news about themselves. They never bother to engage with anybody else's content, but they expect you to engage with their content. Social media is a great way to promote your professional achievements and your forthcoming speaking engagements. So good for you. Make sure you're sharing that information. That should be part of your curated content that you're putting out into the ether. But if that's all you're using it for, you're really not tapping into its full potential. If you find the prospect of sharing content that is not about yourself to be daunting, this is the time to overcome that fear. Sharing content about colleagues and supporting their initiatives and efforts is almost certain to attract engagement and appreciation quickly. That means you're going to get those likes that we all crave. So we get that dopamine high. You're going to get attention. Studies have shown that if, for example, you like every photograph that comes in front of you on your Instagram feed, what it ends up creating is a demand for your content because people appreciate your acknowledgement of their contributions. If you like their contributions, they really want to do the same. It's a sort of reciprocity principle. They want to say, you know, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing. And you're depriving them of that opportunity. So you're actually creating a demand by liking other people's content and not just talking about yourself all the time. You are creating a demand for your own brand effectively. So use your platform to shine a spotlight on the work of others. We're a community after all, and if you actively participate in that community by recognizing hard work and success, by giving the impression that you actually are engaged, you're plugged in, you know what's going on, then the community is more likely to respond in kind and they'll reach out to you in return. Again, it's psychology. Now, let's face it, one of the primary ways in which we all get speaking engagements is by building relationships with the people who typically organize events. You build those relationships by reaching out and getting involved in different initiatives. It's difficult to do that if you only post about yourself and don't engage with anybody else's content. So make a plan. Decide what aspects of your practice, your skill set, and your values you want to highlight, and start identifying, sharing, and curating content that demonstrates you're engaged in the community and recognized by those operating within it. It takes time to develop your personal social media approach, but the sooner you start, the sooner you begin to plan and do things with a plan in mind, rather than just arbitrarily posting once a week or once a month, or when you're sitting in an airport lounge in the brave old world that we once used to experience, and we had a lot of time sitting in airport lounges, then you're missing out on the opportunity to capitalize on the benefits of having a concerted, planned approach. So speaking of capitalizing, thou shalt not underestimate the value of being yourself. Let's face it, there are a great many practitioners operating in the international arbitration field. And with the next generation of lawyers more engaged with ADR than any that came before, the number is likely to continue to increase for years to come. So how do you stand out on social media if, for example, you're one of many associates at a large firm? You have a lot of colleagues. You're a new arbitrator and you want to make a bit of a name for yourself. You're an upcoming practitioner from a jurisdiction outside a major arbitral seat, or you're someone at a small firm that doesn't have a reputation in the arbitration field at all. Well, the good news is you don't have to limit yourself to doing what others are doing. As with a chess game, there are a number of different openings that can ultimately lead to victory. The important thing to do is to start thinking about your personal brand, what you want your message to be, and what you can offer the arbitration community that others may not be able to offer. So for aspiring practitioners, students, anyone who's keen to begin posting more regularly, but isn't really sure where to start and doesn't feel that they have the time, the energy, or the general commitment to coming up with a beautifully curated, beautifully drafted, profound insight on dispute resolution once a week, a good place to start is to share news that's likely to be of interest to the arbitration community. Your feed will then become a useful source of information for others, and that will help you to build your following. And your content will demonstrate that you're engaged with the latest developments in the field. If you're sharing, if you're talking about what's going on, you obviously know about what's going on because you've had to find that content. So it gives the impression that you are up to date. You're staying on top of things. You're engaging with the community. Now, a word of caution. If you include editorial comments or you express extreme positions, you may end up in difficulties. Remember, commandment number 2, think about the future when you come to commenting. After all, you don't know which firm or organization you may end up working with or for in the future. Do not start expressing very critical views about other law firms, I would suggest. This is probably something to avoid. Now, when you share your views or you seek the views of others, above all, be you. Authenticity resonates, so be authentic. You do not need to create some sort of idealized social media personality in order to use LinkedIn successfully. Being genuine resonates. Having a unique voice resonates. You're an individual, and that's your greatest strength as a social media user. By being an individual, I don't mean sharing every detail of your life. People probably do not care what you had for breakfast or if you had breakfast, but talking about things that matter to you, talking about the values that you treasure, talking about your experiences. That's genuine, that's authentic. The posts that resonate with the arbitration community, the ones that will be remembered in the future, are not the congratulatory posts or the self-promotional posts. They're the ones that are useful, the ones that add value, the ones that encourage conversation. You think, oh, it was a post the other day and I had a really good conversation with someone as a result of it. The comments were really interesting. It was really great to hear all those different views. Those are the posts that are genuine. So make it your goal to add to that body of content and let your voice shine through. So a word of caution next. Thou shalt not disregard cultural communication norms. Now, when striving to make connections on social media, it's easy to forget that an approach to communication that may be acceptable in your jurisdiction may not conform to the norms of business communication in your potential connections jurisdiction. Now, for example, I'm British, slightly strange accent notwithstanding. In the UK, it's not generally regarded as particularly good form for strangers to write out of the blue and ask you to give them a job or an internship. Now, times are hard at present, and competition for aspiring practitioners is fierce, but using what is your first and potentially your only interaction with a potential connection to ask them for what is a really big favor, asking somebody to give you a job or an internship, that's a really big favor. It's a bit like asking somebody to help you move. Would you go up to a stranger and ask them to help you move house? You might, I suppose. Again, good luck with that. I don't imagine it would go very well. This could be your one opportunity to interact with that person. They may not be in a position to give you a job. They may, however, be in a position to help you, or they may be in a position to work with you or to give you some advice or to otherwise engage with you. So if you want to avoid that short negative response or no response at all, think very carefully about what you are asking this person you've never met to do for you and what they can reasonably be expected to do for you. If anything, there's no expectation to help strangers who contact you on social media. So make sure that you use those connection opportunities responsibly. With great network comes great responsibilities. Colleagues working in other parts of the world, of course, and other Brits may be far more tolerant of people writing to them and asking for jobs, or hey, asking for them to help you move. But it genuinely doesn't work with me. I set up careers in arbitration to try and help people to find positions. If I had a position to give anybody, I'd be putting it on careers in arbitration. So this all comes back to etiquette once again. If you put it like this, think about it. Is it really a good idea to begin a potential professional relationship by asking for a really big favor? Think about ways in which you can help, ways you can engage with your potential connections' content, with their publications, with their achievements. Don't expect something for nothing. Give before you try and take. And if you are trying to get a job, if you are trying to use social media to pursue professional opportunities, which of course so many people are at the moment, research potential vacancies and the application process. The head of the arbitration team at a swanky international law firm that you would like to employ you is probably, almost certainly, in fact, going to be an extremely busy person. They will not welcome communications from potential candidates who haven't even bothered to check how the firm recruits. Trust me, most arbitration firms do not recruit by you writing to the most senior person in the firm and saying, give me a job. It's not the normal policy. I mean, there may be some out there, but generally there's a whole HR team who's involved in recruitment and you need to apply. Now, another example, potential connections in some jurisdictions, particularly if the person you're seeking to connect with is very senior or even more senior than you, may consider it extremely disrespectful if when you send them that initial connecting message, you use their first name. Titles are important. And although LinkedIn is a social media platform, if you're a student, if you're an aspiring practitioner, always err on the side of caution and be formal. You do not want to be memorable for the wrong reasons. Even if you're more senior, again, it's still best to err on the side of formality unless you know that person is comfortable being addressed by their first name. Before you reach out, research cultural communication conventions and comply with them. For those who are starting out, regardless of background or culture, arbitration practitioners tend to be very busy people. They are almost certainly busier than you. If that world-renowned arbitrator that you spent the last week screwing up the courage to write to on LinkedIn does not respond to your polite, carefully crafted introductory note within 15 minutes, do not chase them an hour later. Do not assume that they will know who you are and they will welcome a question about when you will be responding to them when you end up meeting them in person by chance 3 months later. Lots of people are writing to them. They probably will not remember you individually. This is not, it's not a negative reflection on you. Remember Dunbar's number. We can only maintain relationships with about 150 people. That means if thousands of students or thousands of aspiring practitioners are writing to you, you can't remember them all. It's just human nature. So that brings us to number 8. Thou shalt not forget that you are what you post. In a truly global field such as international arbitration, it's inevitable that anyone who uses social media successfully will end up making connections with colleagues across the globe. As a result, even the most prolific globetrotters among us will not have met all of our connections in person. We may never have spoken to many of our connections on the telephone or via video conference. As a result, their impression of us is likely to be extensively or perhaps entirely shaped by the information that we've chosen to share with them via our social media posts. You literally are what you post because that's all people know about you other than what you're putting on your website. If they've never met you in person, that's all they know. And the goal of many social media posts is to attract attention, to encourage engagement with a particular idea or message. LinkedIn is not Facebook. It's a professional networking site. And the people reading your posts, as somebody once told me, are not my friends. I say, these are my friends on LinkedIn. They said, no, they're not your friends. They're your connections. They're not your friends. Some of them are my friends, I hasten to add. But you need to remember that you're not writing to your friends that you would normally go for lunch with or go for dinner with or go for a coffee with. You're writing to an audience who are potential employers, their potential opposing counsel, their potential colleagues, their parties that might be considering you for appointment as an arbitrator, and much more. They're probably not strangers idly looking for a photograph of a multicolored cappuccino. They might be, but if so, they're probably on the wrong social media platform. So like it or not, what you choose to post, like, share, and comment on will be seen as a reflection of your beliefs, perspectives, and values. So think about how you want to be perceived by the international arbitration community. For example, if you champion diversity in the field, but you regularly post updates on the topic, but you keep accepting and promoting speaking engagements in which the panelists are all the same gender or all the same race, your actions may not be perceived as consistent with the values that you're trying to project. When it comes to creating a brand, consistency is good. If you're pro-diversity, What you post and what you do should reflect your values. If it doesn't, it damages your brand. You are what you post. Careers in Arbitration, for example, has a policy of not posting events unless there's an average of at least one female speaker per panel. That's a fairly low hurdle, I appreciate. It reflects the fact that in different parts of the world, gender diversity is progressing at different rates, but it still leads to me declining to promote a significant number of events. I'm a director of Arbitral Women. For me to conveniently choose to disregard gender diversity on a platform that I run with 26,500 people would be fundamentally hypocritical. It wouldn't reflect my values. It wouldn't be consistent with my brand. It wouldn't be genuine. I'd be breaking my own commandment after all. Okay, so time to get technical. Thou shalt not ignore the LinkedIn algorithm. You want your content to reach the widest possible audience, right? LinkedIn's algorithm places a premium on content that it considers to be relevant. That is why when you look at your homepage, you see your content organized on the basis of relevance, not on the basis of who posted most recently. You can reorganize it if you like, but the default is relevance. So you get to see posts written by people that you know about topics that the algorithm considers will be of interest to you. These are real people, content from real people who will value the opportunity to engage with you and are much more likely to engage with your content in return. And so this allows the LinkedIn algorithm to encourage engagement, which is its second goal. Well, that's great, you may say, but how exactly does it work and how can I use that to my advantage? Well, the LinkedIn algorithm works efficiently behind the scenes to rank and prioritize content in your feed by considering three key factors: personal connections, your interests, and its perception of the likelihood that you will engage with the content that you see. So for your posts to head swiftly to the top of the feeds of those in your network, you need people to engage with them quickly. When it comes to engagement, the LinkedIn algorithm likes instant gratification as much as human beings. So what you're putting out there needs to be of sufficient quality and sufficient interest that it drives engagement quickly. And as for how you can maximize engagement, a few cold hard tips. An interesting and well-written post is a good start. Ben Jaretta spoke last night for Delos on LinkedIn for Lawyers. He is a fantastic example of someone who can write really good posts. So I recommend checking out his lecture on that topic. An interesting written post is a good start, but you need to be authentic. You can do this while being professional. It takes time to find your voice, but people respond to authenticity, as I've explained. However, if you want to achieve more engagement, a good way to start is by adding an image or a video. Your network is much more likely to engage with content if it's accompanied by a visual. We like pictures, basically. We really like pictures of smiling human faces. And we like real photographs of real smiling human faces more than we like stock photographs of people that we don't know smiling. So you can't just post something and just bung a stock photograph in of random smiling people. What we want to drive engagement is real smiling people, so a real photograph from a real event. You can also use hashtags when appropriate, but don't overdo it. This is not LinkedIn, it's not Instagram, sorry. Be strategic, use them sparingly, and always search to see whether the hashtag that you want to use already has followers, and if so, how many? For example, arbitration as a hashtag has more followers than international arbitration. So either use both, or if you're going to use one, use the hashtag for arbitration. It's got a larger following. Last but not least, ask a question in your posts and make sure that you reply to the answers that you receive. You want comments. Comments, the algorithm really, really loves comments. It likes to make people talk to each other. So when people comment, reply. The algorithm likes that. And all of these things make it more likely that the algorithm will play nice and it will give your content a boost. And so you will be glad to hear that brings us to the final commandment. Imagine that every LinkedIn connection is a delightful potted plant sitting on your window. If you overwater the potted plant, it will rot. Trust me, I have tried this with plants and it works every single time. Even cactus. Cacti, I have managed to rot cacti. I'm really good at destroying plants. It's very sad. Now, if you fail to water the potted plant, it will shrivel up and die. Yes, you've guessed it, I've tried that too. I'm bad with plants. So the same applies to your LinkedIn network. If you neglect your connections, if you ignore their messages, if you fail to engage with their content, if you treat them as names on a list rather than as individuals, your relationships are never going to blossom. you're never going to get the full benefit of that engagement. Now, the relationship may not shrivel up and die completely, of course, because, hey, we all like having large numbers of connections. We know this because we're also driven by the dopamine high of social media engagement. But your relationship will never reach its full potential. Now, conversely, if you shower your connections with endless messages, if you chase them for things too much, if you're constantly seeking their attention and approval, if you're liking and commenting on everything all the time, even if you've got nothing sensible to add to the discussion, it may be that that will have a negative impact on your relationship. So the trick is balance. Not too much, not too little. Do not overwater your garden, as it were. Do not overwater your potted plants, and do not fail to water them. So that's all, folks. Those are my 10 commandments of LinkedIn for arbitration practitioners. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me. And if there are any questions, I'm very happy to answer them. And hey, we have ducks for careers in arbitration.
Very much, Mandy. I think there are questions in the Q&A section. We have Peter Petit, who is asking, what do you think is the optimum number of posts someone should make daily, weekly? I think you've touched upon this, perhaps not in numeric terms, but still, but happy to. What would be your answer to Peter?
Well, it depends, Peter, and everybody who may have the same question, what you're trying to achieve with your posts. If you want people to remember that you're alive, then posting once a week is probably enough. If you want people to be regularly engaging with your views, if you want people to start to see you as a source of information, I would suggest, should be aiming for something closer to once a day. To be honest, most of us probably do not have the time to produce more than one good quality post a day. We're all very busy people. But once a day is therefore probably about the maximum I would recommend, unless you've got something big to promote, unless you're running a campaign, unless you're trying to get responses for a survey, unless you've got an event the following day and you need to promote it again because you promised the organizer that you would, or you are concerned about the numbers, or that sort of thing. So generally, any more than once a day starts to create the impression that you've got nothing else to do. And there's a fine line, a fine balance to be struck between keeping in touch, sharing relevant content, and giving the impression that you're not actually an arbitration lawyer, you're a person who spends all their time on LinkedIn like me. So I hope that helps. For those who wanted to see the results of the poll, those were the results of the poll.
So we have. I think
questions.
there are a lot of questions about the time that you need to spend. In particular, a question that has been asked by Steve is, how much time do you budget each day or week? So we'll be back to this, to work on LinkedIn. And is that a problem to disengage due to writing an expert report or anything else, a submission or whatever?
Well, it's a good question. You're not going to like my answer because, again, I'm going to say it depends. All of my answers today are going to be it depends, because we're all individuals and we all have different approaches to our LinkedIn goals. The reality is that we are all busy, and so there will always be periods when we disengage a little bit. When I started posting on careers in arbitration, I posted far less on my personal feed. I posted far less on other feeds as well. I posted particularly far less on Twitter. So I post less on my personal feed nowadays, because I post more on careers in arbitration. I've only got so much time to budget. So it's either I can help people or I can tell people about what book I happen to be reading that week and make some bad joke. And so I've chosen the helping people approach rather than the making the bad joke approach, which I think is a better use of my time. But when it comes to your time, Steve, and the time of everybody else who's kindly tuned in today, what I would suggest doing is treating social media as part of your business development. So putting time aside each day, each week, each month to plan your strategy, to plan what it is you want to achieve, and to put it into practice. So think about how many posts you want to put out that week. If you know that you've got a particularly busy period coming up because you're going to be cross-examined as an expert, or you've got a report due, or you're sitting, or you're going on a family vacation and you've promised your partner that you will not spend the entire vacation staring at LinkedIn. Instagram's okay maybe, but not LinkedIn. Then you can use tools like Hootsuite. Hootsuite does a free package to pre-schedule your social media content. So I did a campaign earlier this year for International Women's Day, and it was a 24-hour campaign. So every hour I posted a profile of a female practitioner in international arbitration. I did not spend 24 hours awake and every hour on the hour post something. That would have been disproportionate. So I used Hootsuite, which allowed me to schedule content in advance. The free package only allows you to schedule, I think, 30 posts in advance. So I scheduled half the day in advance and I did the rest live. But you can use things like Hootsuite, tools like Hootsuite, and there are other tools out there as well, Zoho, for example, and various others. You can use these tools to implement your social media strategy for that week or for that month, even when you're busy. So it's something that you can keep doing in advance. You can keep sharing content, you can keep engaging, but don't be afraid to turn off for a few days. The reality is, once you've began to build a bit of a following, once people have seen that your content is interesting and it's valuable, if you don't post for a week, they're not going to abandon you. They will still engage with your content when you pop up again a week later. Everybody's allowed to have a life. You do not have to be permanently glued to social media. I hope that answers your question to some extent. How about I grab one from the Q&A here? We've got a question from Marina.
Having a question from Alina, exactly.
Yes,
go
absolutely.
ahead.
Absolutely. So Marina asks if I have any views on premium LinkedIn, whether it's worth paying to have a premium account, what benefits, if any, that would provide. A lot of people use premium accounts. In my view, it's quite expensive. I'm not a huge fan. I don't use LinkedIn's premium accounts. I haven't tried it, I must confess. You can have a free trial for a month, I understand. And if it works for you, great. But my view is, as long as you're putting the time and the effort into curating your social media content yourself, it shouldn't really be necessary. But it can be very useful for those who, for example, are planning to build their practice as an arbitrator, because you get access to the full list of people who have looked you up on social media. So if you're interested in who is looking you up and with whom your messages are resonating, it's really interesting to have access to that information. So if you are interested in who is engaging with your content, who's engaging with your brand, who's looking you up on LinkedIn, it can be worth having a premium account. But to be honest, I don't think it's necessary.
We have a question from Alina Lovano, who asks if you could please give a few examples of accounts that you are following, which do a really good job in terms of posting relevant and interesting content in our field.
It's a very good question, Alina. I'm going to betray my own ignorance very slightly, because I don't spend that much time following lots of accounts. Most of the time I spend on social media, I have to spend on posting. So I do end up liking content from my friends, from people that are part of my network that I engage with. When it comes to people who are putting forward good content, I praised Ben Giretta earlier. I will praise him again now. Ben is a really good example of someone who puts together quality posts, thoughtful posts. So I would definitely recommend following him. When it comes to other accounts that I follow, I mean, I follow a number of law firms in the field. I follow a number of organizations. I follow them primarily to keep up to date, rather than to sort of evaluate the quality of their content necessarily. There are a number of people out there who do put together interesting content. I'll try and come up with a few suggestions and perhaps share them with Delos if that would be useful. But I can't think of lots of people off the top of my head, purely because of the way in which I'm running, as I said, I'm running 5 accounts in my personal account. So my social media time, sadly, is basically delegated to posting and liking content. People who run podcasts are a good example, I would say. So I always say nice things about Chris Campbell. Chris runs Tales of the Tribunal podcast, and he shares content which he's gone out and taken the time to obtain. He's spoken to people in the field. He's gained interesting perspectives. So his content is always worth checking out. My friend Svenja Wachtel shares content specifically focused towards digital practice, digital initiatives, digital engagement in the field. And again, she has an interesting series of interviews on the topic. And obviously, I always recommend Delos's webinar series, not just, of course, due to self-interest, but because we have fantastic guests. And, yes, you can tune in for Kabir and me and our bad jokes, but you should really tune in because we've got fantastic speakers, and In Conversation with Neil has fantastic speakers too. So when it comes to content that's being shared, I do count webinar content, video content. It's definitely worth engaging with those sorts of feeds. Anyone who's doing anything innovative and interesting, basically.
So the best recommendation that you would give to potential arbitrators, this is a question that comes up in the chat as well. So I'll try to combine and summarize. The best recommendation that you would give to aspiring arbitrators would be perhaps to always think about posting meaningful things, what you call accurately content, while always being careful not to express too extreme views that might later backfire once you are actually in place, and extreme views could give rise to challenges. So that's a balance to strike, right?
I think so. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think generally most lawyers are fairly responsible individuals. We are all accustomed to arguing for a living. We're all accustomed to putting our client's best foot forward. So we know how to run more extreme arguments and less extreme arguments. And as a result, we should be able to self-censor. We should be able to temper our own behavior. It's only when we're at the beginning of our professional careers that perhaps some of those skills haven't quite begun to settle in. So occasionally students, for example, might express rather more extreme views about issues that are controversial. There's nothing wrong with having extreme views per se, but understanding how to express them in a reasoned and sensible fashion is the key. And social media, frankly, it can have tendencies to be a little bit of a cesspit when it comes to expressing extreme views. You can get very extreme responses. You can get a lot of sort of bullying. You can get a lot of abuse. There is a dark side to social media. You do not want it in your feed. It's not very nice. So, and on a smaller scale, I mean, Careers in Arbitration generally doesn't post unpaid internships, for example. So if occasionally I take the view that an academic opportunity that involves, 2 hours a week might be worth sharing, even though it might not be paid, because it's essentially equivalent, for example, to serving on a committee. It's a different sort of professional opportunity. It's not in any way potentially going to require you to give up your life for 6 months and work for no money. Even if I share those sorts of things, I will get comments because people will say this isn't paid. So even very small deviations from a sort of mainstream view of generally we don't share can result in very extreme comments. So that's just a small example. If you start doing that as a potential arbitrator and coming out with something that might be interpreted wrongly by people, and often when we're putting posts on social media, we may not spend a lot of time thinking about every single word we're saying. Social media has this disposable quality in a way that, for example, a carefully thought out, researched academic article may not have. That's going to be around for a long time. So you're going to make sure you don't say anything in that's going to cause you professional problems. Social media, because of its slightly less permanent feel, tends to encourage people to be a little bit less thoughtful sometimes. So I'm basically just suggesting be a little bit more thoughtful when it comes to social media, because at the end of the day, it's your future career. So put the time in now, think about it. Be careful. With great network comes great responsibility. That's all.
Thank you very much, Mandy. It was very insightful, very interesting. I thank all the attendees. It was a very nice session, and we hope to see a number of you to the next Delos events, including in particular the symposium closing session today in respect of the law governing the arbitration agreement. Thank you very much, and have a nice day. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.